Okay, everybody. Today I'm going to be going over my last presentation over coral bleaching and what it does to ocean ecosystems and how it affects them. To begin, how does coral get its color? This is the main thing. So what it does is there's these little bitty tiny algae, and as you can see down here in the bottom, got a picture of them right here. They're called, I'm going to butcher this word, so sorry in advance, called zooxanthellae. I know that's pronounced wrong, but you get the picture. Basically, what it is, it's a marine algae that lives inside the coral, and it has a symbiotic relationship with the coral. So what it does is it lives inside of it and creates photosynthesis from the sunlight. And then when it does that photosynthesis, it gives that coral, which is actually an animal, that energy. And then that gives that energy enough to where that coral then can reproduce and grow itself and make these lush, lavish, beautiful coral reefs that we all know of. So where can you find coral reefs? So I have a picture down here, and every spot that's highlighted in red is where there are coral reefs found from across the world. This is kind of showing that this problem isn't just a one place that's being affected, it's across the world. So this is really something that it's affecting everywhere. So that's one reason I wanted to bring this to attention. But basically, the coral reefs are found more near the continents and islands. Uh, These are where the really big major coral reefs are found, particularly like the Great Barrier Reef. They're usually found in very shallow and warm water. This is because most tropical reefs, or most big reefs, are found in tropical and subtropical water. They prefer that water temp around 70 to 85 degrees. Now, there are corals that are found all throughout the entire world, even in colder water, but the more diverse ones that has more biodiversity in them are more in the tropical and subtropical regions. So we're going to kind of focus in on that area. So what is coral bleaching and what's it happening? Well, coral bleaching was first described in 1984. Uh, it was found in the Caribbean, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. So what happens? I actually have some pictures down here. This picture here on the left is of healthy coral, and over here on the right is of bleached coral. So what happens is whenever this coral gets really stressed out, it'll expel all the algae out from its body. And this can be done from a wide variety of ways. Uh, Heat and pollution is the main things. So the increased water temperatures, so because of global warming and because of increasing CO2 levels, it's making the ocean water rise in temperature, either through what they call ocean acidification. So because of these CO2 levels are rising, it's creating the pH levels to go up higher and for the actual water temperatures themselves increase. And once it gets too hot, this algae can't survive. There's also these creations of dead zones by through pollution. So we've seen this before, and I've talked about it before in our earlier classes. Whenever there's fertilizer and chemical runoff, there actually will be algae that grows on top of the water. So whenever the top of the water is covered in algae, it's blocking out that sunlight to reach down to the bottom where that coral is. So that coral, the algae in that coral is not getting any sunlight, so it can't produce photosynthesis. That is another major reason why it's happening. So some impacts to the coral. So I found a research study done by A.E. Douglas, and what he found was pretty important, to be honest. So what he found was that this coral bleaching, what it does, not only does it hurt the coral by making it ghost white look like a skeleton, but actually depresses the growth of coral themselves and increases the mortality in coral. Now, he was able to find that if things are changed back to where they were, the coral can actually survive and the algae can come back and replenish itself back into the body of the coral. If it doesn't happen or recover in the couple weeks to a few months, it will take permanent damage and will actually kill the coral, though. I know you see some pictures now of like complete coral reefs that are just skeleton, look like a wasteland. And that's what'll happen if these conditions don't change. But one thing he found was that actually like the branching coral, like so there's a lot of different types of coral. There's some corals that make either massive pieces of themselves that are like really big, and there's some that kind of spider web that look like tree branches. Those branching ones, because they're so much smaller and there's less algae in them, are more susceptible. Uh, but he found that there's really two possibilities for the bleaching. He said the external factors that can create them is different for everywhere, whether it's ocean acidification, dead zones, more pollution, whatever those could be. There's a bunch of different ways, and none of them is really a main factor. They're all kind of tied together. What he found was these two different possibilities for bleaching. So one of them is that the algae signals, whenever they create photosynthesis and send it back into the coral cell so it can benefit from it, is that there's a lack of these signals or there's a collapse of them to where like they just don't happen anymore. So then what the coral does, it goes on the defensive because then it thinks it's an intruder or an invader in it and it'll actually expel the algae cells out of its body. It's in one of those, it's threatening to me, it's going to protect itself. And I have this little diagram to show of a functioning algae cell. It's giving nutrients and benefits to the coral, but one that's not a damaged cell, one that's not giving those correct signals, it's going to get expelled. And that's one reason why I found it. Another one is the response of this thing called Cnidara. What it is a type of algae that lives inside these corals. It's one of the main algae that lives within them. So what he found is that there could be potential pathogens actually affecting this algae. That then, once it's affected, it makes it to where these signals cannot be created to the coral. Those are some of the things he was finding. He hasn't found exactly what they are. They were just his theories that he had found so far. And hopefully there will be more done on that. So, what's the problem? Well, there's a lot of environmental and ecosystem impacts for this. Uh, Basically, coral reefs are called the ocean rainforest, and for a good reason. They host and provide a habitat for over 25% of all marine species. That's a lot of them. Anything from tiny crabs and shrimp, like this guy over here, where they live inside the little branches of coral and actually will camouflage themselves to where they'll look exactly like the coral themselves. And it won't be just any coral, it'll be that specific one alone. So if that coral starts to become bleached and dies, there's no longer habitat for that shrimp or that crab that's made his life to where he has to live in that coral because he's camouflaged for it. He's suited for it. Different parrotfish and gobies actually eat the seaweed that grow around the coral, like this guy here. He's chipping away at the seaweed that grows outside and that grows around the coral. So when they eat that seaweed, it's then providing to where the algae inside the coral can then gather more sunlight and help that coral. And then the parrotfishes actually like take off chunks of coral by accident and they grind them up, and that's how their sand is created actually. And then with all of these smaller species, it creates a bigger hunting ground for bigger predators, uh, big sharks, large sportfish. Those kind of things rely on these coral reefs to live. It's a just a diverse ecosystem that's very fragile when that main thing, the coral, is gone. It also provides us with a lot of resources as well. There's a lot of fish that we harvest and take from these coral reefs that without them, it's going to hurt us as well. So basically, it destroys the entire food web without this coral. It's a major thing. So what are some ways we can fix this problem? Well, there's a lot of different ways we can fix this. One thing is just to have cleaner, better water. Reducing land erosion and chemical runoffs, especially in like the mouths of like rivers and estuaries where it goes straight into the ocean. That's a really major place. If we can reduce the amount of chemicals running into there, that reduces the amount of dead zones. So there's less algae bloom growing. Reduce the amount of land erosion, there's less sediment that's going to be carried over and actually covering up that coral. Another one is burning less fossil fuels. That's just more pollution, more CO2 that's going into the air. Another thing is to actually have marine protected areas or MPAs. Um, Basically, what you'll do is you'll have areas blocked off to where you cannot fish there, you cannot have anything around there that could impede or impact that habitat. So it basically keeps the coral there really, really healthy. They actually have areas to where there's certain sections where you can't farm within so many feet of it, and you can't fish within it. It's pretty cool. It also makes it healthy to where the fish can eat the seaweed that would otherwise hurt the coral. It just provides more habitat and allows that coral to grow naturally. Another one is just to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. I know I've said this a couple times throughout this whole presentation. That's one of the main reasons why this is happening, because that increased water temperature. Um, so reducing the amount of deforestation and burning of trees and timber, uh, that right there is the main reason why there's so much CO2 in the atmosphere right now. So just stopping those two things alone would help reduce the amount of coral bleaching. But basically, if the way things are going currently continue to happen, uh, all of our reefs could be gone by 2085 is when their predicted number is. Uh, so yeah, hopefully we can figure out this and put a stop to it. And these are all my sources, and that's all, guys. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you later.